Welcome back to Nighttime History, where the past whispers softly through the darkness. Tonight we journey back to medieval Europe, to a world before the tick of clocks, where time flows like honey through the measured tolling of bronze bells. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of how medieval monks kept time through sound, season, and sacred ritual. Settle into your comfortable space, let your breathing slow, and allow yourself to drift back across the centuries to a time when hours had different names and the day bent itself around the rhythm of prayer. You wake in complete darkness. The stone walls of your cell radiate cold even through the woolen blanket wrapped around your shoulders. There is no clock on the wall, no glowing numbers to tell you the hour. But then you hear it, a single bell beginning to ring from the tower above. Its bronze voice carries through the night air, deep and resonant. 1 toll, 2, 3. The pattern tells you everything you need to know. This is the call to matins, the first prayer of the monastic day, though the sun will not rise for hours yet. Most people imagine medieval monks checking sundials constantly, but the truth is much more interesting. These religious communities developed one of the most sophisticated timekeeping systems in human history, and they did it primarily through sound. The bell tower stands at the heart of the monastery, like a broadcasting station, sending temporal signals across the countryside. Each bell has its own voice. The larger bells speak in low travelling tones that can reach villages miles away. Smaller bells offer bright, quick notes for internal monastery business. You rise from your simple bed and feel your way through the darkness. Other monks are stirring too. You can hear the rustle of rough cloth, the soft padding of feet on stone. No one speaks. The great silence has been in effect since Compline last evening, and it will not break until after morning prayers. This enforced quiet sharpens your other senses. You navigate by memory, by the feel of worn stones beneath your feet, by the faint smell of incense lingering from yesterday's services. The bell ringer, known as the Campanarius, holds one of the most important positions in the monastery. He must wake before everyone else, climbing the narrow spiral stairs to the bell tower in absolute darkness. Most people think medieval timekeeping was primitive and inaccurate, but actually these bell ringers developed remarkable precision. They use marked candles that burn at consistent rates, water clocks that drip steadily through the night, and their own finely tuned sense of time developed over years of practice. You file into the church with your brothers. The space feels vast in the darkness. Only a few candles burn near the altar, creating pools of golden light that make the shadows seem deeper. The temperature drops even further here. Your breath forms small clouds in the cold air. As you take your place in the choir stalls, you notice how your body has learned this routine so completely that you could perform it in your sleep. Indeed, some of the older monks seem to be doing exactly that, swaying gently as they stand, caught between waking and sleeping. The office of matins begins with a whispered invitation. "Lord, open my lips," the cantor intones, "and my mouth shall proclaim your praise," you respond with the others. The ancient words roll through the darkness like a wave. This is how time is truly measured here, not in minutes or hours, but in psalms and prayers, in the rise and fall of voices joined in sacred song. The service will last perhaps an hour and a half, though no one counts. Time expands and contracts according to the season. Winter nights bring longer offices. Summer allows for brevity. You might assume that all medieval monasteries followed identical schedules, but actually each community developed its own subtle variations. Benedictines structure their day differently from Cistercians. Climate plays a role too. Northern monasteries must adapt to extreme variations in daylight. In winter, they might sing 5 of their 8 daily offices in complete darkness. Southern communities enjoy more consistent light, but must manage the crushing afternoon heat that makes work impossible for hours. Let us pause here for a moment in this sacred darkness. If you are finding comfort in these gentle explorations of the past, I invite you to join our community of nighttime travelers by subscribing to the channel. Turn on the notification bell to hear when new histories arrive, and if you would like to support these quiet journeys, a simple like helps more than you might imagine. I would love to know where you are settling in to sleep tonight, and what time shows on your modern clock as you listen to these tales of timekeeping without clocks. Share your location in the comments below and let us create a map of our dreaming community. The office of Matins concludes as subtly as it began. You file out of the church and return to your cell. But sleep does not come again. This is the strange rhythm of monastic time. You have perhaps 2 hours before Lauds, the office of daybreak. Some monks use this interval for private prayer or reading. Others simply lie in contemplation. The darkness remains absolute. You have learned to appreciate these in-between moments, these pockets of time that have no name and no prescribed purpose. When the bells ring again for Lauds, the eastern sky shows the faintest suggestion of light. This office celebrates the coming dawn, though in deep winter you might finish the entire service before seeing actual daylight. The timing shifts throughout the year, following the sun rather than any artificial schedule. This is one of the most profound differences between medieval and modern time. Our ancestors lived inside natural rhythms. Their hours expanded and contracted with the seasons. A summer hour contains more minutes than a winter hour. Time itself breathes with the world. After Lauds comes prime, the first hour of the working day. Now the monastery truly awakens. The great silence breaks. You hear voices in the cloister, the clatter of tools being gathered, the creak of doors opening. But even this active period is measured by bells. A particular sequence calls the community to the chapter house for daily meetings. Another summons everyone to the refectory for a simple breakfast of bread and ale. Smaller bells coordinate work groups. The sacrist rings for those preparing the church. The cellarer's bell gathers those working in the stores. The monastic day divides into careful portions. Terce arrives at what we would call 9 in the morning, though the monks think of it as the 3rd hour after sunrise. This brief office provides a pause in the morning's work. You might be copying manuscripts in the scriptorium when the bell sounds. The careful work of shaping letters stops immediately. Brushes are cleaned, ink is covered. Nothing is more important than the call to prayer. Most people imagine medieval monks as constantly praying, but actually they spent just as much time working. The rule of Saint Benedict prescribes a careful balance. Idleness is the enemy of the soul, it states. Between the 8 daily offices, monks farm, cook, clean, study, teach, and practice crafts. But all of this work happens within the framework of bells. A monastery functions like a vast clockwork made of human parts, with bells providing the regulatory heartbeat. The midday office of sext marks the sun's highest point. In summer, this might signal the start of a rest period. The Mediterranean tradition of the siesta makes perfect sense in a world without air conditioning. Monks retreat to cooler spaces, perhaps the underground cellars or the shadowy cloister walks. In winter, sext might be the first office where you can actually see clearly without candles. The pale winter sun streams through high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the cold air. None follows in what we call mid-afternoon, though again the exact timing shifts with the season. This name confuses modern readers. None does not mean none, as in zero. It comes from the Latin for ninth, the ninth hour after sunrise. Over centuries, this timing gradually crept earlier until none occurred closer to noon. This linguistic drift gave us our modern word noon, though medieval none actually happened around 3 in the afternoon. The bells for Vespers ring as shadows lengthen across the cloister. This evening office carries special beauty. The setting sun paints the stone walls gold and crimson. Candles are lit one by one, creating a gradual transition from natural to artificial light. The Psalms of Vespers often speak of evening and rest, of completion and gratitude. You can feel the monastery beginning to slow, to prepare for the coming night. Between Vespers and the final office of Compline comes the evening meal, and perhaps the only recreational period of the day. Monks might walk in the gardens, engage in permitted conversation, or simply sit in quiet contemplation. But always, always, they remain aware of time's passage. Without clocks, they develop an intricate internal sense of duration. They know instinctively when Compline approaches, when the great silence will descend once more. The final bell of the day calls you to Compline, the office that completes the circle. This service has a different quality from the others. Where Matins feels like emerging from dreams, Compline prepares the community for sleep. The prayers acknowledge human frailty, the dangers of the night, the need for divine protection during the vulnerable hours of darkness. You sing the ancient words that monks have sung for centuries. Into your hands, Lord, I commend my spirit. After Compline, the great silence descends like a blanket of snow. No unnecessary word will be spoken until after Matins tomorrow. This might seem oppressive to modern minds, but the monks experience it as freedom. The silence creates space for thought, for prayer, for simply existing without the pressure of conversation. You return to your cell, wash your face and hands in cold water from a pottery basin, and prepare for sleep that will last only until the bells call again in the deep of night. Most people assume medieval monks slept poorly on their hard beds, but actually they practiced a form of segmented sleep that many modern sleep researchers now consider more natural than our 8-hour blocks. They sleep from Compline until Matins, perhaps 4 hours. Then wake for prayer and contemplation. Then sleep again until Lauds. This pattern of first sleep and second sleep was common throughout medieval society, not just in monasteries. The bells themselves require constant maintenance. The campanarius must oil the mechanisms, check the ropes for fraying, ensure the bronze remains free of verdigris that might dampen the tone. Large bells can weigh thousands of pounds. Ringing them requires real physical strength and precise technique. Ring 2 enthusiastically, and you might crack the bell. Ring too gently, and distant fields will not hear the call to prayer. Some monasteries employ a system of smaller bells and clappers for daily use, saving the great bells for feast days and emergencies. Weather changes everything about the bell schedule. Fog muffles sound, requiring harder ringing, and sometimes supplementary bells placed around the monastery grounds. Rain creates its own complications. The campanarius must still climb the slippery tower stairs. The ropes become heavy with water, but the bells must ring. The entire rhythm of monastic life depends on their reliable voice. During thunderstorms, though, bell ringing stops. Medieval people know that bell towers attract lightning. Many a campanarius has died at his post during electrical storms. The acoustic properties of bells fascinate medieval minds in ways we might not expect. Monks believe certain tones can drive away demons, that properly blessed bells create sacred space through sound alone. They name their bells like beloved animals, often inscribing them with protective prayers. When a new bell arrives at the monastery, it undergoes an elaborate consecration ceremony, almost like a baptism. The bell receives holy water, sacred oil, and incense. Only then can its voice join the choir of time. You learn to distinguish between the bells by their unique voices. The Angelus bell has a bright, silvery tone that carries joy even in its call to prayer. The chapter bell speaks with more authority, a deeper bronze voice that brooks no delay. The refectory bell chatters quickly, almost eagerly, summoning hungry monks to meals. The death bell tolls with slow, measured strokes that seem to count out the heartbeats of a life now ended. Each bell becomes a personality in the soundscape of monastic life. The timing of offices shifts dramatically with the liturgical calendar. During Advent and Lent, extra prayers extend the offices. Major feast days might include processions that add an hour or more to the usual routine. But here is something surprising. Medieval monks actually have more vacation days than most modern workers. The liturgical calendar includes numerous feast days when manual labour stops. Only the essential work of cooking and animal care continues. These breaks prevent the exhaustion that might come from endless routine. Summer brings its own temporal challenges. In northern latitudes, the summer sun barely sets. Matins might occur in full daylight, confusing the body's natural rhythms. Monasteries adapt by shifting their entire schedule earlier. They rise at what we would call 2 in the morning to maintain some connection to darkness for the night office. Conversely, winter darkness in these same latitudes means singing most offices by candlelight, an expense that strains monastery budgets. The process of learning to ring the bells takes years. A young monk might begin by simply watching, absorbing the patterns through repetition. Then he learns to ring the smaller bells, the ones that summon monks to particular tasks. Only after proving his reliability does he earn the right to ring the great bells that regulate the entire day. The campanarius often keeps detailed notes about timing, written in the margins of liturgical calendars. These notes reveal surprising precision. Ring matins when the star above the eastern tower touches the roofline. Contrary to popular belief, medieval monasteries do not forbid all timekeeping devices. They use sundials when weather permits, marking not just hours but the specific times for offices. These sundials often feature spiritual inscriptions. I count only the sunny hours, or time flies, eternity remains. Water clocks drip through the night in larger monasteries, their steady rhythm providing backup for the campanarius' trained sense of time. Some communities experiment with sandglasses, though these require constant attention to flip them at the proper moment. The monastic schedule profoundly influences the surrounding countryside. Farmers working monastery lands know to begin their day when they hear prime ringing across the fields. Village churches that cannot afford their own bells rely on the monastery's signals. The bells for none tell shepherds when to drive their flocks to shade. Vespers signals merchants to close their stalls at the weekly market outside the monastery gates. The bells create temporal unity across social and physical boundaries. Different religious orders develop distinctive approaches to the divine hours. Carthusians, those most austere of monks, add extra offices in the deep of night. They rise not once but twice for lengthy vigils. Franciscans, following their founder's love of simplicity, might reduce elaborate singing to simple recitation. The warrior monks of military orders like the Templars must balance their prayer schedule with training for combat. They develop abbreviated offices that can be said quickly before battle. The scriptorium presents unique challenges for bell-scheduled time. Copying manuscripts requires consistent light and steady hands. A scribe cannot simply drop his quill mid-letter when the bell rings. Special permissions allow scribes to complete the word, the line, perhaps even the paragraph before responding to the call. But this privilege comes with responsibility. Some scribes confess to the sin of deliberately starting new sentences just before the bell, buying themselves extra minutes of work they love. Kitchen duty follows its own temporal logic within the larger structure of bells. The cook must begin bread before matins to have it ready for breakfast after prime. Soup for the midday meal starts simmering after lauds. The kitchen bell rings its own patterns, calling servers, announcing when food is ready, summoning monks to wash their hands before meals. The cook develops an almost mystical ability to time dishes perfectly, knowing instinctively when to add ingredients, so everything finishes just as the refectory bell sounds. The infirmary operates on a gentler schedule. Sick monks receive dispensation from night offices. They might hear matins from their beds, joining in spirit if not in body. The infirmarian keeps his own careful time, administering medicines at intervals marked by prayers rather than hours. He knows to give fevered patients willow bark tea after terse, to change wound dressings during the quiet period after none. Even illness bends to the rhythm of bells. Seasonal changes bring subtle adjustments that outsiders never notice. As days shorten in autumn, the gap between Vespers and Compline narrows. Monks must accomplish their evening tasks more quickly. Conversely, the long summer evenings stretch this period into hours of golden light. Some monasteries add supplementary prayers or readings to fill the expanded time. Others simply grant monks more freedom for contemplation or approved recreation, like tending personal garden plots. The bell tower itself becomes a calendar. Monks mark the tower's shadows at various offices throughout the year, creating a massive sundial. They note where shadows fall at the exact moment of ringing, building a physical map of time's passage. These observations, recorded over decades, allow precise timing even on cloudy days. The campanarius knows that when water drips from a particular gargoyle's mouth, terza should ring. When frost forms on the north window, matins comes earlier. The monastery garden tells time through flowers. As you walk the medicinal herb plots between offices, you notice how certain plants open and close with reliable precision. The morning glory unfurls for lauds. The scarlet pimpernel closes its petals before Vespers, earning its folk name Shepherd's Weatherglass. Monks plant these temporal flowers deliberately, creating living clocks that function even when clouds obscure the sun. The garden becomes a backup timepiece written in petals and leaves. Rain transforms the acoustic landscape completely. You stand in the cloister during a downpour, listening to how water changes the bell's voice. The sound arrives muffled, almost underwater. The campanarius must pull harder, ring longer. Sometimes he employs the wooden sementron, a plank struck rhythmically with mallets whose sharp crack penetrates rain better than bronze bells. Most people think medieval monks stubbornly followed identical routines regardless of weather, but actually they showed remarkable adaptability to nature's moods. Winter darkness creates profound challenges you might not expect. The The monastery's beeswax candles, so precious they are counted like coins, must burn from vespers through matins to lauds. A single night might consume a week's worth of summer illumination. Some communities develop ingenious solutions. They create specialized winter chapels, smaller spaces that concentrate both body heat and candlelight. They adjust the pace of psalms, singing faster to shorten offices and conserve precious wax. The stars become your intimate companions during winter nights. Walking to matins, you navigate by constellation as much as by memory. Monks develop sophisticated astronomical knowledge not from scholarly curiosity, but from practical necessity. They know which stars appear above the bell tower at each office throughout the year. The constellation rising determines the call to prayer as surely as any water clock. This stellar timekeeping reaches such precision that monasteries can maintain synchronized schedules across hundreds of miles. Spring flooding brings its own temporal disruptions. When the river rises, cutting off the monastery from its outlying farms, the usual work schedule collapses. Fields lie underwater, mills cannot turn, but the bells continue their ancient rhythm. Monks redirect their labour to indoor tasks, spending flood days in extraordinary productivity in the scriptorium or workshop. They joke darkly that God sends floods to ensure manuscripts get completed and altar cloths properly mended. You discover that different seasons actually change the physical sensation of time passing. Summer heat makes the afternoon offices feel endless. Your wool habit clings with sweat. The chapel air grows thick and still. Elderly monks sometimes faint during none when temperatures peak. But winter cold creates the opposite effect. Offices seem to race past as bodies seek to generate warmth through movement. Monks unconsciously speed their chanting, eager to return to whatever meagre heat source awaits. The agricultural calendar weaves through the liturgical one in complex patterns. Harvest season means skeleton crews for daytime offices, as most monks work frantically to bring in grain before weather turns. The abbot grants special dispensations, allowing field workers to say abbreviated prayers where they stand among the wheat sheaves. But everyone returns for vespers, bringing the smell of cut grain and honest sweat into the chapel. These harvest offices carry special intensity, gratitude mixed with exhaustion. Fog creates temporal islands. On mornings when mist rises thick from the river, each building becomes isolated in white silence. The bells sound strange, sometimes seeming to come from impossible directions as sound bounces off the vapour. Monks miss offices because they literally cannot find the church door. The prior keeps a rope stretched between dormitory and chapel for such mornings. You grip this lifeline, moving hand over hand through blindness, while the bell tolls somewhere in the white void. Most people imagine medieval monks completely ruled by nature's whims, but actually they developed sophisticated strategies for weather prediction. The monastery's chronicler maintains detailed records spanning decades. He notes that 3 days of east wind in September means early frost. When mice invade the granary in unusual numbers, hard winter follows. These observations, tested across generations, allow planning that seems almost prophetic to outsiders. The changing length of daylight creates mathematical challenges no modern person considers. In December, the period between sunrise and sunset might contain barely 8 modern hours. But monks must still fit in the day offices of prime, terci, sext, and none. Each becomes compressed, rushed. Psalms that luxuriate in summer's extended light now race past. Conversely, June's 16-hour days stretch these same offices into leisurely contemplations. The divine office breathes with the planet's tilt. Thunderstorms pose genuine terrors beyond lightning strikes. Medieval monks understand that certain atmospheric conditions make bells ring spontaneously. They have seen bronze sing without human touch when electrical charge builds before storms. These phantom rings disturb everyone, suggesting supernatural presence. The campanarius must climb the tower to muffle the bells with leather wrappings, a dangerous task when lightning threatens. Some monasteries install grounding chains, having learned through tragic experience that metal conducts heaven's fire. The monastery's location shapes its entire temporal existence. Mountain communities deal with sudden weather changes that can transform schedules within minutes. You might begin terse under brilliant sunshine and finish in driving snow. Valley monasteries face different challenges. Temperature inversions trap cold air and fog for days. Coastal foundations must account for tides. They know certain offices will coincide with low tide, allowing access to tidal pools for gathering seaweed to fertilize gardens. Autumn brings the strangest temporal phenomenon. As leaves fall and temperatures drop, the bell tower actually changes its acoustic properties. The campanarius must recalibrate everything. Sounds that carried for miles in summer's thick air now dissipate quickly in autumn's clarity. He adjusts his ringing force, sometimes adding extra strokes to ensure distant workers hear the call. The bells themselves contract slightly in cold, raising their pitch by minute amounts that only trained ears detect. Ice storms create temporal chaos. When freezing rain coats everything in crystal armor, normal life stops. The bell ropes become too slippery to grip safely. Ice weights down bell wheels, making them impossible to swing. The campanarius might manage to strike the bells directly with hammers, producing strange muffled notes unlike their usual voice. Monks slip and slide toward chapel, arriving bruised and late. These ice offices take twice their usual time, as everyone moves with extreme caution. The phases of the moon influence more than you might expect. During the full moon, matins feels different. The silver light streaming through windows creates an otherworldly atmosphere. Monks report more vivid dreams, more difficulty returning to sleep after night offices. New moon matins, by contrast, occurs in absolute darkness that seems to press against the eyes. Some monasteries adjust their candle allowances based on lunar phases, recognizing that human needs change with celestial rhythms. Drought brings unexpected temporal challenges. When streams run low, water clocks fail. The steady drip that regulated night hours becomes irregular, then stops entirely. Mills cannot grind grain, changing meal schedules. Gardens require constant watering, disrupting the usual work patterns. But most surprisingly, drought changes sound itself. Dry air carries bells differently. The campanarius must relearn his craft each rainless summer, discovering new acoustic patterns in the parched atmosphere. Wind direction determines more than weather. You learn that north wind carries the bells toward the village, while south wind pushes sound back across the monastery fields. East wind brings the smell of pine forests and the promise of fair weather. West wind tastes of salt, even hundreds of miles inland, warning of Atlantic storms approaching. The campanarius factors wind into every ring, pulling harder against eastern gusts, lighter when western gales assist. The first frost marks a temporal boundary as clear as any feast day. After frost, the growing season ends. Work patterns shift from cultivation to preservation. The herbalist rushes to harvest medicinal plants before freeze destroys their potency. The seller recounts stored vegetables obsessively, calculating whether supplies will last until spring. These calculations influence everything from portion sizes to the intensity of prayers for good weather. Solar events create rare but memorable disruptions. During eclipses, the usual markers fail. Sundials lie. Shadow measurements mean nothing. The natural order seems suspended. Medieval monks view eclipses with deep unease, not from superstitious fear, but from practical concern. How do you maintain temporal order when the sun itself rebels? They fall back on water clocks, counted prayers, and the Campanarius' internal sense of duration until the cosmic mechanics resume their proper motion. The candlemaker's workshop fills with the sweet scent of beeswax as you enter. Brother Thomas tends enormous vats where golden wax melts slowly over controlled fires. He pours the liquid into bronze moulds, each one precisely calibrated. These are not ordinary candles, but temporal instruments. Along their length run carved rings, spaced exactly 1 hour's burning apart. When lit at Compline, the flame consumes wax at such a predictable rate that the Campanarius can glance at the remaining rings and know precisely when to ring matins. Most people assume medieval candle clocks were primitive guesswork, but actually monasteries achieved remarkable standardization. The wax must contain exact proportions of beeswax to tallow. Too much tallow and the candle burns fast and smoky. Pure beeswax burns too slowly and expensively. The wick requires careful braiding from specific fibers. Linen burns steadier than hemp. The workshop maintains sample candles from previous years, comparing burn rates obsessively. A variation of mere minutes per candle could compound into chaos over weeks. The water clock chamber occupies a special room near the bell tower. You enter to find a complex arrangement of bronze vessels, ceramic pipes, and measuring bowls. Water drips from the upper reservoir through a tiny bronze aperture no wider than a wheat stalk. This opening must be cleaned daily with a horsehair brush. Even the smallest accumulation of sediment changes the flow rate. The water drops into a series of calibrated containers. When each fills, it tips, pouring into the next while triggering a small bell. These bells tell quarter hours through the night. Winter presents unique challenges for water clocks. Ice destroys the delicate mechanisms. The clockkeeper must add salt to lower the freezing point, but salt corrodes bronze fittings. Some monasteries heat their clock rooms with carefully tended braziers. Others drain their water clocks entirely during hard freezes, relying solely on candles and starred observations. The most ingenious solutions involve underground clock chambers, positioned below the frost line where Earth's warmth keeps water liquid year-round. The sundial garden contains dozens of different designs. Horizontal dials mark hours on flat stones. Vertical dials climb the church walls. But the most intriguing is the shepherd's dial, a portable cylinder that monks carry to distant fields. You hold it vertically, align it with magnetic north using a lodestone, and read the time from shadows cast inside the cylinder. Most people think medieval people only had fixed sundials, but actually they developed numerous portable timekeeping devices. Each sundial requires local calibration. A dial that keeps perfect time in Rome runs fast in Paris. The monastery's dial maker must calculate the exact latitude, the magnetic deviation, the difference between solar noon and clock noon. These calculations fill pages with careful mathematics. Monks discover that time itself varies by location, that noon arrives at different moments across God's earth. This knowledge disturbs some theologians who believe time should be universal, but practical necessity overrides philosophical concerns. The sand glass collection in the sacristy serves specialized purposes. The smallest measures just 3 minutes, timing the elevation of the host during Mass. Medium glasses run 15 minutes, marking sermon length. The largest holds an hour of sand, though few trust its accuracy compared to water or candle measurements. Sand proves temperamental. Humidity makes grains stick. Different sand sources flow at varying rates. The sacrist spends hours testing new sand, sifting for uniform grain size. You might assume medieval monks used crude hourglasses filled with any available sand, but actually they developed sophisticated requirements. The best temporal sand comes from marble dust, ground to exact specifications. River sand contains too many irregularities. Beach sand carries salt that attracts moisture. The glass itself must have perfectly smooth interior walls. A single bubble or imperfection creates turbulence that disrupts flow. Master glaziers command high prices for proven timepiece glass. Marked ropes provide another temporal tool. The campanarius keeps coils of rope with knots tied at specific intervals. As he performs his duties, the rope passes through his hands. Each knot marks a completed prayer or a fraction of an hour. These tactile timekeepers work in absolute darkness when candles would be dangerous in the bell tower. The ropes grow soft and polished from years of handling, each knot worn smooth by countless touches. The monastery's collection of astrolabes represents centuries of accumulated wealth. These brass instruments combine artistry with mathematics. By sighting stars through the astrolabe's aperture and adjusting its rotating components, monks can determine both time and latitude. But astrolabes require clear skies and considerable skill. Young monks practice for years before mastering the subtle calculations. The instruments become family treasures, passed between monasteries like sacred relics. Incense clocks offer aromatic timekeeping. Long strips of compressed incense powder burn at predictable rates. Different sections contain various fragrances. As the ember travels along the strip, the changing scents announce the passage of time. The chapel might fill with frankincense during prime, shift to myrrh by terce, and finish with sandalwood at sext. These olfactory clocks work even for blind monks who cannot see conventional timepieces. The scriptorium develops its own temporal measurements based on copying speed. A skilled scribe knows exactly how long each page requires. Illuminated capitals take 1 hour. A full page of careful text needs 3. These human rhythms become so regular that scribes effectively transform into living clocks. The scriptorium master plans work assignments around these bodily measurements. Knowing Brother Francis copies 20% faster than Brother Hugh, but makes more errors when rushed. Water displacement timers work through clever engineering. A vessel with a small hole in its bottom floats in a larger water basin. As water seeps in, the vessel gradually sinks. When it touches bottom, an attached lever rings a bell. The clockkeeper must maintain exact water levels and clean the hole daily. These devices prove especially useful for timing irrigation in the garden, releasing measured amounts of water to thirsty plants. Most people believe medieval timekeeping relied entirely on celestial observation, but actually, monks pioneered mechanical solutions. The earliest mechanical escapements appear in monastery workshops. These devices use falling weights to drive geared mechanisms. A horizontal bar called the folio swings back and forth, regulated by adjustable weights. Each swing allows the main gear to advance one tooth. While not true clocks yet, these mechanisms point toward the mechanical future. The oil clock provides winter backup when water freezes. Instead of water, vegetable oil drips through calibrated openings. Oil's higher viscosity requires different calculations, and temperature still affects flow rates. But oil remains liquid at temperatures that would freeze water solid. The smell of rancid oil in the clock chamber becomes a familiar winter scent. Monks joke that they can tell time by their noses when entering the room. Counting prayers creates human clocks. A full recitation of the Pater Noster takes a predictable duration. 15 repetitions equal roughly 1/4 hour. The rosary, when it develops later, provides a tactile counting device. But even simple prayer repetition serves temporal purposes. Night watchmen count aves to mark their rounds. Kitchen workers time bread, baking by credos. The human voice becomes a measuring instrument. Shadow boards mark solar progression without complex mathematics. A vertical board with pegs arranged in patterns casts distinctive shadows throughout the day. When the shadow of the eastern peg touches the western mark, terce should ring. These crude but effective devices require no calculation, only observation. Rural monasteries prefer them to complex sundials. They work in any language, need no numerical literacy, and can be built by any carpenter. The monastery's fire clock burns all winter in the warming room. Logs of standard length and thickness burn at known rates. The fire tender knows that oak logs last 2 hours, birch only 1. By selecting wood carefully, he creates a temporal furnace. Ash marks in the hearth show when to add new logs. This living clock heats bodies while measuring time, combining necessity with ingenuity. Candle auctions provide unexpected temporal precision. When selling monastery goods at market, the auctioneer lights a small candle. Bidding continues until the flame dies. These candle auctions last exactly as long as the candle burns, preventing endless haggling. The candle becomes judge and jury, its flame the final arbiter. Monks discover that buyers bid more aggressively as the candle shrinks, creating temporal pressure that drives prices higher. Musical duration serves as another measuring system. Certain psalms take predictable times to sing at standard pace. The monastery's cantor knows that Psalm 119, the longest in the Psalter, requires nearly half an hour for full recitation. Shorter psalms provide smaller increments. This musical timekeeping works even when all mechanical devices fail. As long as monks remember their psalms, they can measure duration through sacred song. Your stomach knows sext approaches before any bell rings. The hollow sensation begins precisely at midday, whether summer or winter. This bodily timekeeper proves so reliable that the Kitchener often jokes he could set the monastery schedule by Brother Bernard's rumbling belly. Medieval monks understand something modern science only recently rediscovered. Our bodies contain multiple internal clocks, each keeping its own time through chemical signals and neural patterns. The infirmarian keeps detailed records of bodily rhythms. He notes that fevers spike predictably at Vespers, wounds bleed more freely during the morning offices, birth pains among the village women tended by monastery midwives intensify with the moon's pull. These observations, accumulated over centuries, reveal patterns that guide medical treatment. A medicine given at prime works differently than the same dose administered at Compline. Most people assume medieval monks ignored their body's natural rhythms, but actually they built their entire schedule around human biological needs. The traditional siesta after sext acknowledges the post-meal drowsiness that strikes regardless of willpower. The timing of matins at roughly 3 in the morning coincides with a natural sleep interruption that occurs in all humans. Rather than fighting biology, monastic life embraces these patterns. Your bladder becomes a surprisingly accurate timepiece during night offices. The last drink at Compline passes through your system in predictable intervals. Many monks wake moments before the matins bell, prompted by internal pressure rather than external sound. The body learns these rhythms so thoroughly that travelling monks report waking at their usual times, even in strange monasteries with different schedules. Sleep itself divides naturally into segments that monasteries exploit. After Compline, you experience deep, dreamless sleep for approximately 4 hours. This first sleep refreshes the body. Then comes a period of natural wakefulness, when the mind sharpens and prayer feels most intense. Medieval monks fill this wakeful period with matins and private meditation. Second sleep follows, lighter and filled with dreams, lasting until Lauds. This biphasic pattern matches human biology far better than modern continuous sleep. The monthly cycles of monastery life extend beyond lunar observations. The Celara notes that appetite increases predictably throughout the month. Food that satisfies in week 1 leaves monks hungry by week 4. Bloodletting, that medieval medical staple, follows bodily rhythms too. The infirmarian knows certain brothers need bleeding every 28 days, others every 35. These individual variations get carefully tracked in medical records. Seasonal changes trigger profound bodily shifts. As autumn progresses, monks require more sleep. They wake groggier for matins, struggle to stay alert during afternoon offices. The wise abbot adjusts expectations accordingly. Winter brings its own challenges. Bodies crave fatty foods, fires, and companionship. The prohibition against unnecessary gathering gets relaxed slightly, acknowledging that humans need social warmth when physical warmth fails. Most people think medieval monasteries demanded impossible physical discipline, but actually they showed remarkable accommodation for human frailty. Elderly monks receive permission to sit during long offices. Those with weak bladders may leave discreetly during psalms. The very young and very old get extra sleep, missing either matins or Compline. These mercies recognize that bodies age and change, that rigid rules break people rather than sanctify them. Your breathing becomes a temporal instrument during meditation. The controlled inhalations and exhalations of contemplative prayer create internal rhythm. 4 breaths in, hold for 4, release for 4. This ancient pattern, taught to novices, serves double duty. It calms racing minds while providing a bodily metronome. Experienced monks can estimate quarter hours by counting breath cycles. The body becomes clock and prayer simultaneously. Hunger rhythms prove so predictable that fasting requires careful management. Skip too many meals and the body rebels, making prayer impossible. The monastery's dietary schedule alternates fasting with feeding in patterns tested over generations. 2 meals on ordinary days, 1 during strict fasts, none on Good Friday. But always these restrictions account for labour needs. Harvest workers cannot fast like scribes. The body's demands override spiritual ambitions. Temperature sensitivity varies predictably throughout the day. You notice how the same chapel feels frigid at matins, but comfortable by terce, even when actual temperature barely changes. Bodies run cooler in pre-dawn hours, warming naturally as day progresses. The monastery's heating schedule acknowledges these patterns. Fires get lit not when thermometers would suggest, but when bodies need warmth most. The refectory reader discovers that digestion affects consciousness. Reading aloud during meals requires different skills at different times. Morning readings can be complex theological treatises. Bodies fresh from sleep handle difficult concepts, but evening readings must be simpler. Tired bodies and full stomachs make concentration difficult. The reader learns to match content to corporeal capacity. Pulse rhythms fascinate the infirmarian. He takes wrists between thumb and forefinger, counting beats against Ave Marias. A healthy brother shows 60 to 70 beats per prayer. Fever raises the rate, exhaustion lowers it, but most intriguingly, pulse naturally quickens during certain offices and slows during others. Bodies respond to sacred rhythms in measurable ways. Prayer physically alters heartbeats. Most people assume medieval monks lived in constant exhaustion, but actually their schedule provided more rest than many modern jobs. Between offices, work periods rarely exceed 3 hours. The body receives regular breaks, preventing the bone-deep fatigue of endless labour. Even during harvest, the bells enforce rest. Sext brings water and shade. None allows brief sleep. Vespers ends fieldwork regardless of remaining tasks. Exhausted workers make poor monks and dangerous farmers. Muscle memory creates temporal patterns stronger than conscious thought. Your hands know when to fold in prayer, when to turn manuscript pages, when to grip work tools. These movements happen without deliberation, triggered by bells and bodily rhythm. The scribe's fingers start flexing minutes before the scriptorium bell. A gardener's back straightens instinctively as none approaches. Bodies anticipate scheduled changes, preparing physically for transitions. The choir stalls reveal bodily timekeeping through worn wood. Each monk's usual position shows unique wear patterns. Tall brothers leave heel marks where they shift weight during long offices. Elderly monks wear smooth depressions from gripping carved armrests. These physical traces map bodies onto time, showing how flesh and wood interact through countless repetitions. The stalls remember every office, every season, every year of bodily presence. Wound healing follows circadian rhythms that monastery infirmarians exploit. Surgical procedures happen at prime when bleeding is minimal and healing hormones peak. Bandages get changed at specific offices to match the body's repair cycles. Most surprisingly, prayers seem to accelerate healing, not through divine intervention, but because rhythmic chanting regulates breathing and reduces stress hormones. The body heals faster when aligned with sacred time. Fasting cycles reveal the stomach's own intelligence. During Lent's 40 days, hunger pangs arrive precisely at usual meal times for the first week. By week 2, the stomach adjusts, accepting new patterns. By week 6, bodies have completely adapted. Breaking fast too quickly causes illness. The stomach must be retrained gradually. This bodily wisdom guides how monasteries structure their fasting calendar, alternating strict and relaxed periods. Hair and nail growth provide slow temporal markers. The monthly tonsure renewal keeps monastic haircuts precise. Brothers joke they can tell time by touching their scalps. Fingernails get trimmed every 2 weeks, toenails monthly. These bodily renewals create longer rhythms beyond daily offices. The barber surgeon knows each monk's growth rate, scheduling accordingly. Some need weekly attention, others monthly. Bodies refuse standardization even in communal life. Night vision adapts predictably to darkness cycles. Monks navigating to matins develop enhanced scotopic sight. Their pupils dilate faster and more completely than daytime workers. This adaptation reverses during summer when matins occurs in twilight. The eye's temporal flexibility amazes monastery physicians. Bodies reshape themselves to match environmental demands, becoming more nocturnal in winter, more diurnal in summer. Sweat patterns mark seasonal transitions precisely. The first day requiring sleeve rolling during terce signals spring's arrival more reliably than any calendar. When backs stay dry through none, autumn has begun. The launderer tracks these changes through washing frequency. Winter generates 2 habits per monk weekly. Summer demands daily changes. These mundane bodily functions create a parallel calendar written in salt and moisture. Voice changes throughout the day affect sacred singing. Morning offices find voices husky and low. By tierce, vocal cords have warmed and loosened. Sext brings peak clarity. Evening offices require careful management as voices tire. The cantor assigns parts accordingly. Bass voices lead matins when their natural depth needs no forcing. Tenors take afternoon leads when higher notes come easier. The choir becomes a bodily instrument played by time itself. The blacksmith sets down his hammer as the nun bell echoes across the valley. 3 strikes on bronze mean more than prayer time to the village below the monastery. This is the signal for afternoon water rites. Farmers abandon their fields and hurry toward the irrigation channels. The monastery bells orchestrate an intricate dance of shared resources that keeps entire communities alive. Without clocks in their homes, villagers depend entirely on these bronze voices from the hilltop. You watch from the monastery walls as life below responds to each bell. The miller opens his sluice gates at prime, knowing he has exclusive water access until terce. Bakers fire their ovens when matins rings, timing their loaves to emerge warm for the faithful walking to morning mass. Even the tavern keeper uses bells to regulate drinking hours. Most people assume medieval villages operated in temporal chaos, but actually, the monastery bells created remarkable coordination across social classes. The weekly market follows bell-regulated rhythms. Merchants may erect stalls after lords but cannot sell before prime. This prevents wealthy traders from cornering goods before working people arrive. The cheese sellers know their wares grow too soft by sext and reduce prices accordingly. Livestock trading stops at none to prevent exhausted animals from being sold. The final bell of Vespers sends everyone home, whether deals are complete or not. These temporal rules level the commercial playing field. Children in the village school learn their lessons by bells. The schoolmaster, often a monk assigned to teach local youth, divides instruction into bell-measured segments. Latin grammar fills the morning between prime and terce. Mathematics occupies the period until sext. Afternoon brings writing practice until nun rings release. Students internalize these rhythms so completely that years later, as adults, they still feel the urge to conjugate verbs when certain bells sound. The village midwife keeps her own temporal records aligned with monastery bells. She notes that most babies arrive between Compline and Matins, as if human birth prefers darkness and quiet. Labour pains intensify predictably with bell sequences. Women in childbirth often beg to hear the bells, finding comfort in their familiar rhythm. The midwife times her interventions by these bronze markers, knowing when to encourage pushing, when to let nature work. Fishing rites along the monastery's river section rotate with mathematical precision. Each family gets access from one office to the next. The Martins fish from Lords to Prime, the Bernards from Prime to Terce. This temporal sharing prevents overfishing and ensures everyone gets productive hours. Night fishing rights between Compline and Matins go to the poorest families who cannot afford to miss daylight work. The bells transform the river into a temporal commons. Most people think medieval peasants worked constantly, but actually the bell system enforced regular breaks that modern labour laws would approve. Field workers pause at each office, not necessarily for prayer, but for water, food, and rest. The monastery's agricultural overseer knows exhausted serfs produce less. The bells create humane rhythms even within feudal hierarchy. A lord who works his people through bell-marked breaks faces censure from church authorities. The pottery workshop demonstrates how craft production aligns with sacred time. The potter's wheel turns steadily from prime to terse, while clay is fresh and pliable. Glazing happens during the cool morning hours before sext. Afternoon heat between sext and none proves perfect for initial drying. The kiln fires overnight, started after Compline when ascending smoke won't disturb anyone. Finished pieces emerge at Lords, still warm but cool enough to handle. The bells coordinate this complex process without written schedules. Wedding ceremonies cluster around specific bells for practical reasons. Morning weddings happen after terce, when everyone has completed essential morning tasks. Afternoon ceremonies follow none, allowing celebration before Vespers calls everyone back to duties. The poorest couples marry at prime, minimizing lost work time. Funeral timing follows similar patterns, with burial between officers to accommodate mourners who must return to fields or workshops. The village bathhouse operates on a bell-determined schedule that might surprise modern assumptions about medieval hygiene. Women bathe from Lords to terce, men from terce to sext. Mixed bathing occurs only during the period between non and vespers, when married couples can attend together. The bathhouse keeper heats water through the night, timing fuel addition so perfect temperature coincides with the Lord's bell. These temporal divisions prevent conflicts while maximising access. Seasonal labour contracts specify work periods in bells rather than hours. A harvest hand agrees to cut grain from prime to vespers with rest at each office. A thatcher commits to complete one roof section between Lords and sext. These agreements need no literacy or numerical knowledge. Both parties understand the temporal boundaries. Disputes rarely arise because the bells provide impartial judgment. The monastery inadvertently becomes a labour relations board through its timekeeping. The tavern's relationship with bell time proves complex and sometimes contentious. Monastic authorities prefer drinking to stop at Compline, but tavern keepers argue that workers need refreshment after long days. A compromise develops. Ale service continues past Compline, but wine stops. This acknowledges that mild ale serves as food, while wine encourages excess. The bells thus regulate not just when people drink, but what they consume at different hours. Medical services in the village follow bell-coordinated patterns. The barber surgeon makes rounds between prime and terce, when light is good but heat hasn't built. Tooth pulling happens at none, when people have maximum pain tolerance. The herbalist gathers medicines at specific bells, knowing dawn dew enhances certain properties while noon sun concentrates others. Even bloodletting follows temporal patterns, scheduled for early morning when the body supposedly contains less heat. Court proceedings begin at terce, ensuring all parties have time to arrive from outlying farms. Simple cases must conclude by sext. complex disputes can continue past none, but never beyond Vespers. This temporal framework prevents powerful litigants from exhausting opponents through endless proceedings. The bells enforce a kind of judicial mercy, ensuring even justice remains subordinate to divine time. The relationship between monastery bells and village crime patterns fascinates legal records. Thefts cluster in the dark period between Compline and Matins. Fights erupt most frequently in the restless time before Vespers when work is done, but daylight lingers. The village constable patrols according to these patterns, visible at high-risk times, absent when bells and custom maintain order. Some villages post guards at the bell tower itself, understanding that silencing the bells would create social chaos. Market gardens surrounding the village synchronize planting with liturgical seasons announced by special bell patterns. When Candlemas bells ring their distinctive rhythm, farmers know to start seedlings indoors. The complex peals of Easter signal safe outdoor planting. Harvest home coincides with Michaelmas bells. This agricultural calendar needs no written almanac. The bells encode centuries of accumulated wisdom about local climate patterns. Guild meetings follow bell schedules that rotate fairly among different trades. Carpenters meet after Vespers on Mondays, giving them evening light. Weavers gather at prime on Wednesdays when natural light best shows thread colours. Smiths convene at Compline on Fridays, their work least disturbed by darkness. This temporal democracy ensures no profession dominates village politics through convenient meeting times. Most people assume medieval villages were isolated and provincial, but actually the bell system creates surprising synchronization across regions. Major feast days. See bells ringing similar patterns from Scotland to Sicily. A merchant travelling between towns can predict local schedules by listening for familiar bell sequences. This acoustic unity spans linguistic and political boundaries. The bells speak a temporal Esperanto understood across Christian Europe. The monastery's influence on village time extends to childhood games. Children play bell ringer, taking turns calling imaginary offices. They recite rhymes that encode temporal knowledge, prime for breaking fast, sext for finding shade, none brings father home, vespers ends our trade. These playful mnemonics ensure even illiterate youngsters internalize daily rhythms. The bells colonize imagination as thoroughly as they regulate behavior. Resistance to bell time occasionally surfaces in surprising ways. Some villagers deliberately mistune their activities, starting work slightly before or after bells to assert independence. Others create alternative temporal markers, the daily flight of crows, the opening of morning glories, the shadow of a particular tree. These small rebellions against ecclesiastical time reveal human needs for autonomy even within accepted structures. Yet the bells remain paramount, their bronze authority ultimately unquestioned. The monastery workshop fills with unusual sounds. Metal gears click against each other in steady rhythm. A weighted rope descends slowly through a wooden frame. Brother Francis, the mechanically gifted cellarer, adjusts small lead weights on a horizontal bar. This peculiar device represents something revolutionary, though few recognize it yet. The embryonic mechanical clock will eventually dethrone the bells, but for now it serves merely as their assistant, helping the campanarius wake at precisely the right moment for matins. You examine the mechanism closely. A rope wound around a drum supports a heavy stone. As gravity pulls the stone downward, the drum rotates. but instead of spinning freely, an ingenious device called an escapement interrupts the motion. A vertical rod with pallets catches the teeth of a crown wheel, releasing them one by one. Each catch and release produces that distinctive tick-tock sound. The horizontal bar, called a foliot, swings back and forth, its rhythm controlled by adjustable weights. Moving the weights outward slows the mechanism. Sliding them inward accelerates it. Most people believe mechanical clocks appeared suddenly in medieval Europe, but actually they evolved from monastery water clocks and astronomical instruments over centuries. The key innovation isn't the falling weight or the gears, both known since antiquity. The breakthrough is the escapement, that clever mechanism that portions out power in discrete, countable increments. Monasteries provide perfect laboratories for this development. They need precise timekeeping, have skilled craftsmen, and possess the wealth to fund experimentation. The abbot views these mechanical innovations with mixed feelings. On one hand, they promise more reliable timekeeping, especially during winter when water freezes and candle supplies run low. But something ineffable is lost. Bells connect the monastery to cosmic rhythms, to the movement of celestial bodies, to the breath of the world itself. Mechanical ticking seems artificial, divorced from nature's flow. Yet practicality wins. The device gets installed in the Campanarius's chamber, its steady beat ensuring he never oversleeps. Strange problems emerge with early mechanical timekeeping. The mechanism runs faster in winter when cold contracts the metal parts. Summer heat expands components, slowing the beat. Humidity swells wooden frames, causing bindings. Brother Francis spends hours adjusting, oiling, cleaning. He discovers that different oils perform better in different seasons. Olive oil congeals in winter, but works perfectly in summer. Rendered beef tallow stays fluid in cold, but turns rancid in heat. Time itself seems to resist mechanical capture. The monetary cost of mechanical clocks shocks even wealthy monasteries. A single clock costs more than copying 100 manuscripts or building a new dormitory. The brass alone requires months of fundraising. Skilled clockmakers command fees that rival master architects. Yet monasteries invest heavily, sensing that mechanical timekeeping represents the future. They're right, though not in ways they anticipate. These devices will eventually democratize time, wresting temporal control from ecclesiastical hands. You notice how mechanical time subtly changes monastic life. The bells still ring for offices, but now they ring at precisely consistent intervals. No more variation between summer and winter hours. Sext occurs at the exact midpoint between sunrise and sunset in theory, but mechanical clocks fix it at an unchanging moment. Some older monks complain that rigid mechanical time violates natural rhythms. Young monks appreciate the predictability. They can plan activities knowing exactly when interruption will come. The translation between bell time and mechanical time proves surprisingly complex. Monastic hours divide daylight into 12 parts regardless of season. Mechanical hours tick identically, whether in December, darkness, or June, brilliance. Brother Francis creates conversion tables, complex charts, showing when mechanical noon corresponds to solar noon throughout the year. These tables fill pages with calculations. Time itself has become mathematical rather than experiential. Most people assume medieval clocks immediately showed hours and minutes on dial faces, but actually early mechanisms indicated time through automata and bells. Mechanical figures emerge from doorways, strike gongs, perform little dances. These elaborate displays serve practical purposes. Moving figures visible from distance communicate time to illiterate observers. The mechanism might track astronomical events too. Phases of the moon, positions of planets, dates of movable feasts all get encoded in brass and wood. The social implications of mechanical timekeeping emerge slowly. When only monasteries possess clocks, nothing much changes. But as cathedral towns install public clocks, temporal power shifts. Merchants can coordinate without depending on monastic bells. Craftsmen organize workdays around mechanical hours rather than liturgical offices. The monastery's temporal monopoly begins its long erosion, though centuries will pass before mechanical time fully conquers sacred time. Clock maintenance creates new specialized roles. The clockkeeper must understand complex mechanics, possess steady hands, and maintain obsessive attention to detail. He lubricates dozens of pivot points, adjusts escapement geometry, monitors weight descent rates. This technological priesthood speaks its own language of arbors and barrels, of count wheels, of warning wheels. Mechanical time demands mechanical servants, a new class of temporal technicians. Accuracy obsesses early clockmakers. They compare mechanical time against sundials, star positions, marked candles. Discrepancies get recorded in detailed logs. A well-maintained clock might drift only minutes per day, revolutionary precision compared to seasonal variations in natural timekeeping. But this accuracy comes at a cost. Mechanical time alienates humans from cosmic cycles. Dawn and dusk become arbitrary moments rather than temporal boundaries. The world grows more precise but less poetic. The spread of mechanical clocks follows trade routes and pilgrimage paths. Italian monasteries develop sophisticated mechanisms first. German craftsmen improve the engineering. English monasteries add their own innovations. Each region's clocks reflect local culture. Southern mechanisms often include elaborate astronomical displays. Northern clocks emphasize reliability over ornamentation. But everywhere, mechanical time advances inexorably. Resistance to mechanical timekeeping takes subtle forms. Some monasteries install clocks but continue following seasonal hours. Others use mechanisms only as backup systems. Rural communities prove especially conservative. Farmers see no advantage in mechanical precision. Their work follows solar and seasonal patterns that no amount of brass gearing can change. The bells remain their primary temporal guide for generations after urban areas adopt mechanical time. The philosophical implications of mechanical time trouble medieval theologians. If time can be captured in metal and wood, what does this mean for eternity? Does mechanical regularity diminish divine mystery? Some argue that clockwork mechanisms reveal divine order in creation. Others worry that reducing time to mechanical ticking diminishes spiritual experience. These debates fill theological treatises that few read today, but which wrestled with profound questions about time's nature. Clock towers begin competing with bell towers for architectural dominance. The visual display of time challenges the acoustic monopoly of bells. Dials visible from town squares allow individual time checking without waiting for bells. This privatization of temporal knowledge shifts power from institutional announcers to individual observers. Anyone who can see the clock face knows the time. The democratization of temporal knowledge begins. You observe how mechanical time creates new anxieties. Precise timekeeping reveals tardiness that bell time forgave. A monk arriving as the bell finishes tolling was on time. But mechanical clocks show he's 3 minutes late. This precision breeds temporal stress unknown to previous generations. The forgiving flexibility of natural time yields to mechanical absolutism. Punctuality transforms from approximate virtue to precise requirement. Economic relationships shift as mechanical time spreads. Labour contracts specified in bells must be rewritten in hours. Wage calculations grow more complex, but also more fair. A worker can prove exactly how long he laboured. Employers can demand precise attendance. The mechanical clock becomes an impartial arbiter in economic disputes. Time literally becomes money in ways impossible under bell regulation. The relationship between mechanical and liturgical time remains complex for centuries. Monasteries might use clocks to time bells, but the offices themselves resist mechanical standardization. A sung psalm takes as long as it takes. Contemplative prayer cannot be rushed because a clock says time has expired. The mechanical and the sacred coexist uneasily, each claiming temporal authority. Most people think mechanical clocks quickly replaced all other timekeeping methods, but actually multiple systems coexisted for centuries. Sundials remain common for checking clock accuracy. Water clocks persist in some monasteries. Candle measurements continue in private chambers. Sand glasses, time-specific activities. The mechanical clock joins rather than replaces this temporal orchestra. Medieval people inhabit multiple time systems simultaneously, choosing the most appropriate for each purpose. The skills required for clockmaking create new educational needs. Monasteries establish workshops teaching mechanical arts. Young craftsmen learn gear ratios and escapement geometry alongside traditional skills. This technical education planted seeds for later scientific revolution. Understanding clockwork mechanisms trains minds to think mechanically about natural phenomena. The clock becomes a metaphor for the universe itself. As night falls once more over the monastery, you find yourself back where this journey began. The bell for Compline rings across the darkening valley, its bronze voice carrying the same message it has delivered for centuries, yet now you hear it differently. This is not merely a call to prayer, but the heartbeat of an entire civilization, a sonic architecture that shaped how medieval people experienced their days, their seasons, their very lives. The Campanarius climbs his familiar stairs one last time today. His feet know every worn stone, his hands every rough spot on the spiral walls. In the bell chamber, the great bronze instruments hang silent, waiting. He checks the mechanical clock ticking steadily in its corner, that newcomer to the temporal realm. Its precise beats measure something different from what the bells announce. The clock counts identical minutes. The bells proclaim sacred moments. Both have their place, but they speak different languages about time's nature. You realize now that medieval monasteries created far more than a schedule of prayers. They invented a way of living inside time rather than racing against it. Their bells didn't merely mark hours, but wove temporal fabric that connected human activity to cosmic rhythms. When prime rang, it acknowledged sunrise, whether that came early in summer or late in winter. When vespers sounded, it honoured sunset's arrival whenever that might be. Time breathed with the world rather than ticking mechanically forward. The monks gathering for this final office of the day embody routines refined over lifetimes. Their bodies have become temporal instruments, calibrated by decades of repetition. They know without thinking when to rise, when to kneel, when to sing. This embodied timekeeping represents something profound that mechanical clocks can never replicate. Living creatures synchronizing with sacred patterns, finding rhythm in repetition, meaning in measured days. Through the chapel windows, you see the village below settling into evening patterns still governed by these bells. Merchants close their stalls, farmers return from fields, children abandon their games. The tavern keeper measures his remaining hours of service. All of this activity choreographed by bronze voices from the hilltop, a dance between sacred and secular that has played out for generations. The monastery provides temporal structure for the entire community, a gift of organized time in an era before personal clocks. The relationship between natural and measured time reveals itself most clearly in these liminal moments. As darkness deepens, the precise intervals between mechanical hours matter less than the felt experience of day yielding to night. The bells acknowledge what every creature knows instinctively, that time moves differently in darkness, that night hours have their own quality distinct from daylight measurements. This sensitivity to temporal texture gets lost when time becomes purely mechanical. Inside the church, candlelight creates pools of golden illumination. The flames flicker with air currents, making shadows dance across stone walls. These very candles served as clocks themselves, their marked lengths measuring study periods and prayer times. Every aspect of monastic life participated in timekeeping: architecture, light, sound, routine, even breathing patterns all contributed to temporal awareness. The monastery functioned as a living clock made of human souls and daily practices. You understand now why the transition to mechanical time took centuries rather than decades. Bell time wasn't simply a primitive precursor to clock time, but a fundamentally different temporal system. It connected human activity to seasonal cycles, acknowledged the variability of natural rhythms, created community through shared acoustic experiences. Mechanical time offers precision, but loses this organic connection to lived experience. Both systems have value, but they serve different human needs. The evolution from bells to clocks represents more than technological progress. It marks a shift in how humans relate to time itself. Bell time was communal, experienced simultaneously by everyone within hearing. Clock time becomes increasingly individual, checked on personal devices, creating private temporal worlds. Bell time was qualitative, distinguishing between different kinds of hours. Clock time is quantitative, reducing all moments to identical units. These aren't just different ways of measuring, but different ways of being. As Compline concludes, the great silence descends over the monastery. This intentional quiet creates temporal space unmarked by bells or clocks. In silence, time reveals its most mysterious qualities. Minutes might feel like hours. Hours might pass like moments. Without external markers, consciousness creates its own temporal experience. The monks understood something profound, that time itself changes quality in silence, becoming fuller, deeper, more pregnant with possibility. The stars emerge overhead, those original clocks that guided humanity long before bells or mechanical movements. Medieval monks watched these celestial timekeepers with careful attention, reading the hours in constellation positions, predicting seasonal changes from stellar patterns. This astronomical timekeeping connected earthly schedules to cosmic movements. Every matins aligned with specific star positions. Every vespers corresponded to planetary configurations. Time scales nested within each other, the daily within the seasonal, within the celestial. You've witnessed how medieval timekeeping involved the entire human being. Eyes tracked shadows on sundials and stars across sky. Ears attended to bells and natural sounds that marked temporal passages. Hands felt prayer beads and knotted ropes that counted intervals. Noses detected seasonal changes in air and incense that marked liturgical time. Bodies hungered and tired in predictable patterns. Medieval temporal awareness engaged every sense, creating rich, multidimensional time experience. The practical wisdom embedded in monastic timekeeping deserves recognition. Work periods limited to prevent exhaustion. Regular breaks enforced by bells. Seasonal adjustments that acknowledged human needs change with light and temperature. Feast days providing necessary recreation. Even the night office of matins, seemingly harsh to modern sensibilities, aligned with natural sleep patterns we're only now rediscovering. These medieval monks intuited truths about human chronobiology that science confirmed centuries later. Beyond the monastery walls, the influence of bell time extended throughout medieval society. Markets, courts, schools, workshops all organised around these acoustic signals. The bells created temporal democracy, providing free timekeeping to rich and poor alike. No one owned the bell's voice. Everyone could hear their message. This public time-bound communities together, creating shared rhythm that transcended social divisions. The loss of communal bell time represents a profound social change we rarely acknowledge. As you prepare to leave this medieval world, you carry new understanding of time's complexity. Modern life offers unprecedented temporal precision, but at the cost of temporal texture. We can specify meetings to the minute, but lose awareness of seasonal rhythms. We synchronize globally, but fragment locally. We measure time obsessively, but often feel we have none. The medieval experience offers not nostalgia but perspective, reminding us that other temporal relationships are possible. The mechanical clock ticking in the bell tower represents humanity's drive to master time. Yet the bells themselves remind us that time also masters us. We remain creatures of rhythm and season, of light and darkness, of youth and age. No amount of mechanical precision changes these fundamental patterns. The wisdom of medieval monasteries lay in acknowledging this reality, in creating temporal systems that worked with, rather than against, human nature. Tomorrow the bells will ring again, as they have for centuries. The Campanarius will climb his tower. Monks will gather for prayer. Villagers will organize their days around bronze voices. But gradually, incrementally, mechanical time will assert greater influence. Clock towers will rise alongside bell towers. Personal timepieces will privatize temporal knowledge. The acoustic community of bell time will fragment into individual temporal worlds. Yet something of the bells persists even in our mechanical age. We still speak of hours having different qualities: rush hour, happy hour, the witching hour. We still feel time's passage differently in different contexts. A watched pot never boils. Time flies when we're having fun. These experiential truths echo medieval understanding that time is not merely quantity, but quality, not just measurement, but meaning. The monastery at night returns to timelessness. Between Compline and Matins stretches an unmarked expanse, where only the stars and the mechanical clock maintain their vigil. But even now, bodies are preparing for tomorrow's pattern. Internal clocks count toward waking. Dreams process the day's experiences. Rest restores energy for coming labour. Time continues its work even in apparent stillness. This journey through medieval timekeeping reveals how profoundly different societies can organise temporal experience. The bells created a world where time breathed with natural rhythms, where community synchronized through shared acoustic signals, where sacred and secular time intertwined inseparably. Understanding this lost world helps us recognize both the gains and losses of mechanical time's triumph. We need not return to bell time, but we might learn from its wisdom. As we leave the medieval monastery, its bells fall silent in the darkness. But their echo continues, reminding us that time is not merely what clocks measure, but what humans experience. The bells taught generations to find rhythm in routine, meaning in repetition, sacred pause in busy days. These lessons remain relevant, even as our timepieces grow ever more precise. We remain temporal creatures swimming in time's river, seeking patterns that make meaning from mere duration. Thank you for joining us on this gentle journey through the medieval world of bells and time. If you enjoyed exploring how our ancestors measured their days before mechanical clocks and you're still awake, we invite you to discover more stories from history's quiet corners in our other nighttime documentaries. But if these tales of bells and temporal rhythms have carried you into peaceful sleep, then rest well, dream deeply, and may your slumber be as regulated and restorative as a medieval monk's. Until we meet again in history's whispering darkness, may time treat you gently